Okay, let's start. Thank you all for joining this tech talk. We're going to talk about what's new in .NET 6. This talk should have been done like in January by the end of last year, but well, here we are. Actually, there are a couple of images that are not updated, so I'm just going to explain through that. So let's start. Okay, where is my pointer? So for .NET 6, let's start with a bit of story. So how we ended up with .NET, just .NET. So if you remember at the beginning, we have .NET Framework around 2002, something like that. They launched the version 1, and then, well, you know the story, 2, 3, 3.5, 4, 4.5, 4.6 until 4.8. .NET Framework was highly coupled with Windows. So basically, there was no way to execute or make applications that will have cross functionality, running on Linux or Macintosh or stuff like that. We had Mono, so there was a way to do that, but was not provided directly by Microsoft. So with that, they launched the .NET Core around 2016. With these versions, they started using the LTS and current life cycle. I'm gonna talk about that a bit in a moment. Just wait. So after having Core, they ended up having two versions, like .NET Framework and .NET Core. And the way to have if you wanted to write code that was compatible with both versions, you needed to aim to the .NET Standard. So .NET Standard is not a framework per se; it's just a collection of all the libraries that are compatible with .NET Framework and .NET Core. So they started doing that to have like so we were able to get some functionality. So if you have like plugins or libraries that you wanted to maintain support for .NET Framework, but also want to give support to .NET Core, so you needed to aim to the right .NET Standard version. But with the release of .NET 5, there are no new versions of .NET Standard, so basically we can just get rid of that. With .NET 5, the .NET Framework, .NET Core, .NET Standard was reborn as just .NET. And as I said, on .NET Core, they started the current life cycle for current and LTS life cycle. So we have .NET 5, .NET 6, and we're going to talk about this current versus LTS. So every Microsoft product has right now they have what they call the Microsoft Modern Lifecycle Policy. Lifecycle has well, when the product is released and ends when there is no more support for that. Support means that you get support, and they also get or they also release some minor updates. For LTS, they are giving 3 years of support after launch. And for current, there's only 18 months. So with this new modern lifecycle policy, they are aiming to release one major .NET version every year in November. And well, even numbered releases will be LTS, like .NET 6 currently is LTS, and odd number releases are marked as current, like .NET 5. So next slide is a table with the last or the latest versions. You can see it's not updated. With .NET 6, the latest patch version is like 6.0.5, but you can see that we have the release date is November 8, 2021, and the end of support is 3 years later, in 2024. So currently, .NET 5, it's out of support. So if you have applications in .NET 5, you should migrate. If you are still working on that, you should migrate to .NET 6. And because of this life cycle, there is still support for .NET Core 3.1 because it's marked as an LTS, and support will end by December this year because, well, that was a release on December, but they are aiming to do the releases now on November. About .NET 6, well, .NET 6 is a long-term support release, as we saw. This new version comes, or this version comes with a C#10. They have added a new functionality, some new feature for the C# language. Also, Visual Studio 2022, it's currently the only Visual Studio you can use to create applications in .NET 6. They also provide new feature for F#. I haven't used F#, but just wanted to mention this. So C#10 is only supported with .NET 6, and Visual Studio 2022 is required, as I said, to create .NET 6 projects. So do you have any questions so far? Oh, my camera. Okay, no questions. So next slide. So what's new in C#10? We're going to talk about a bit, not all of the features, new features. There is a lot of information in the Microsoft official documentation pages. So I'm going to share the link after this meeting, just so you can review all of them. So I'm just going to talk about some highlights or some new stuff that might be useful or interesting for, or I think that might be useful or interesting for us as developers. So the first one is the Recordstructs. With .NET, with .NET 5, they launched C#9, and they included the record modifier, so you can create a record instead of a struct or instead of a class. And with this version, they are expanding that, and they provide the record structures. So with this, we now have the record class syntax, so you can create a record, and it will be like if you are defining a reference type, and the record struct will be to define like value type objects. Yeah, here, record struct to define value type functionality. This record structs come with a feature called a positional parameter definition. So you can see an example here. Basically, you can define a record just like it's highlighted here. Sorry. Yep. I was trying to mark this first name, last name. So this is conditional parameter definition. So when you do this, the compiler automatically creates a public auto-implemented property, and also, well, for record types and read-only records, you can create a read-only record. The compiler will create init-only properties, so to avoid mutability. So you have one record defined, and you cannot modify any of the data inside of that. For record structs, you can have by default a read-write property. We'll have a primary constructor with parameters matching the positional definition. So you can see in this example, a public record person is created with string first name and string last name. And basically you can use to create a new person. This is a new feature. We're going to talk about that later. You don't need to well, the compiler will infer that you are creating a new person. So you just don't need to create new person and that stuff. But yeah, you create that, and it will be treated as if you created a record with all the traditional ways. No, you create if you had created a constructor and some properties and other nice stuff, or a nice feature about this is you can see there is a D2string by default provides you information about each property. So if you create a class, by default D2string will return you just the object type, but with records it will just give you all the information for this record. So you can see here we have the person. This is the output. Will return the record name and all the properties listed here. So we have first name Nancy and last name W. Also, record types, well, they have a value-based equality using members. So you can, if you have two records with the same data, they will be compared, or the comparison will result to a true. So in this example, we have person 1 and person 2 with the same name, the same first name, the same last name, and a string array of phone numbers. And you can see if, because the data is the same, the equal operator will return to true. And even, well, this because this is based on equality value based, if you add new data to the phone number array, this will be treated as the same phone number array, so no changes will be identified, and the output will be also true. The only way to have a difference here is if we change the last name or the first name. And well, if you see there is also a reference equals, because this will be false. The reference is not the same. We have two different objects. It's not the same object in memory. This is how to say this reference equal functionality prevents this struct record and struct class objects to be used with entity framework. So this is more like a nice feature to have for your domain model and avoid having or sorry, with your DTOs and not in your domain model. Your domain model should still be Poco. Any questions so far? Okay. Well, as we said, these record structs avoid mutability. So instead of that, you can take one record, modify one or two properties from that, and create a copy of that with new values. For this, they provide the width expression. So this width expression and the toString, you can see here the width expression is, for example, on this example, this person 1 is Nancy W, but we are creating a person 2, define it as the person 1 with a different first name. So you can see it here. Person 2 will be John W, and for numbers is just a string array. And also you can create another phone number, will be the same. If you create a person 2 with phone numbers based on person 1, the output will be Nancy W and phone number system string, but will be different. And at the end, you can also have person 1 copying and just leaving the empty parameter for the width keyword. If you leave those empty, the person 2 will be an exact copy of the person 1. There's also a deconstruct method, so you can do something like if you have a person, you can have all the properties in each of. You can define the variables in a tuple or on that way, so you can deconstruct the information and have the first name and the last name directly on the variables without having to navigate through the object. So in this case, you have a teacher. It will be giving you the first name, last name, and because this teacher is instantiated as a person. The person only has first name, last name, and there is no need to deconstruct the grade as is defined as the teacher. But if you deconstruct the teacher as a teacher object, then you will need to have the grade also deconstructed. So that's why we have this difference between this one and the second example. And as I said, because the entity framework needs reference equality to ensure that only one instance of that entity is on the database, then records are not suitable for this because the reference equality will not work as entity framework expects or as ordinary class object works or reference object works. So any questions before we go to the next feature?
I have a
question. The next one. Okay.
All right. Okay. Can you go back to the previous?
Yes.
So in the code, when you were talking about the construct, so what was the difference between person and teacher? Is person a superclass of teacher or
person is an abstract, it's like the base class, if you can say that, but it's a record. So you have teacher that it's inherits from person, and you have student that inherits from person also. So because they inherit from person, you can cast that object. You can cast a teacher into a person, into its parent.
That it doesn't deconstruct the grade, or
that's why we are deconstructing a person record, not a teacher. You can see here we define person teacher equals a new teacher. This teacher is casted as a person. So person just have first name and last name. So when you do the deconstruct for a person, it will just have first name and last name properties. If you this teacher, if you cast it as a teacher instead of a person, you will have first name, last name, and grade deconstructed.
Okay, I got it now.
Okay. Okay, so the next feature is global using directives. This is a nice one. This feature allows for namespaces to be brought into scope globally across the project. That means that, well, so far you are used to, or we are used to, for example, on each of the files, or each of the source files, we have a using system, for example. With global directives, global using directives, you can just define this global using system on one file, and it will be the same as if you are defining that using on each of your source files, Yes, it has the same effect as adding the same using. It could be placed anywhere, but some conventions, or what I have seen is most of these globals are added into a global using source file, so you can have your global using in one place and just add all the namespaces that you need to reference, or that will be used everywhere. So, for example, if we use mediator in all of our controllers, we can define a global using for mediator, and it will be referenced in all of the files without having to add the reference at the top of each of the source files. With this using directives, they added another feature called implicit usings. So when you create a new template, if you create a new console application or a web application on Visual Studio 2022 targeting .NET 6, these new templates will have this implicit using feature in the property files, in the solution file, sorry, in the project file. And by default will be enabled. This means that if you create, for example, a console or library application, by default, all these classes or namespaces will be referenced using these implicit usings as a global directives. So we have system collection, generic, system IO, link, .NET HTTP, threading tasks. If you remember, these are the default namespaces that are added every time you create a new source file. And when you create a web project, web or web API, you have the system.NET JSON, ASP.NET Core Builder, ASP.NET Core Hosting, ASP.NET Core HTTP, routing, extension configurations, dependency injection, hosting, and logging as implicit using. So you will have more, your source file will be cleaner because all of the frequently namespaces or the frequently used namespaces will be referenced in just one file, and not you will avoid having a copy on each of your source files. We can see an example when we talk about the template. So I'm going to skip the questions for this. And the next feature is called file scope namespace declaration. A file scope namespace declaration means that you can omit the opening new how to say this this new parentheses. I forgot the name. Sorry. This curly parentheses. So instead of having namespace and open and close the parentheses, you can the curly brace. You just define your namespace at the top of your file. So you can say this this file, for example, this program or this class or this whatever you want, will be under this namespace, and you avoid having to open and have a level of indentation here. And you can just define your classes, interfaces, structs, everything under that namespace. Well, with this namespace declaration, file scope namespace declaration, you cannot include additional namespaces. So you can see on this example, there is a nested namespace. This will not be able to be done on the file scope namespaces. So if you ever need something like that, then go keep with the current way to do namespace declarations. If not, you can switch to the new one and have more clean source files. And with this, we end up with all the nice, or what I think is nice to have in C#10. Do you have any questions related to if you had seen something, some other feature that was not mentioned here and want to talk about that, we can try to, if you have questions. Okay, so the next one, we are going to talk about what is new now. We have seen what is new in .NET in C#10. So now we are going to see what is new in .NET 6. As I said, .NET 6 includes new project templates that take advantage of new language features on both C#9 and C#10. So these features are having the main async method. Top level statements, this was added in C#9. Target type new expressions, this was, I talked about this before. I mean, you don't need to, you can skip the type that you are creating. You just add new and add the parameters and avoid having like a new student. If you are defining your variable as a student, the compiler will infer that you are creating a new student, so you can avoid that. This is the target type new expressions. And well, the implicit global using directives you have on each new project. If you create new projects in Visual Studio, the template will include this. And file scope namespaces, as we just talked about that. And nullable reference types. Nullable reference types, it's something that will probably give you a bit of some headaches, because this was added back up C#8 when they introduced the nullable value types. You remember when you can start when they enabled the way that we can mark an integer, an integer, Boolean, or some value types as nullable. So we can have an integer could be null or could have a value or stuff like that. They introduced this, but by default, all the reference types were treated as nullable. So your string was treated as nullable. Your ints by default were marked as non-nullable, and you needed to use the question mark to mark that integer as a nullable and all that stuff. But for reference types, by default, that was the how it was used. But Microsoft or the .NET team is pushing forward or moving into trying to avoid any null reference exceptions. So with this nullable reference type, if you just copy your code, not migrate, if you create a new template and start pulling classes or stuff like that, you will have a lot of warnings. So you will need to use something called the nullable, how do you say it? The exclamation character, it's nullable forgiving operator. So for example, if you wanted to create a string, you need to mark it as nullable or provide a value for that. If you declare your string as non-nullable, you will need to define a value for that. This means that you need to add a constructor and set a value for that property. For example, you have a string property, student name on your student class. You will need to define a constructor there and assign a property to the student, or instantiate it to null or string empty, just give it a value. You can instantiate it to null, and if you add the nullable forgiven operator at the end, so you can your string student name get set equals null, and then the exclamation point, the exclamation character, you are telling the compiler that yes, I know this is null for now, but when I will be using this value, I know for sure that this will have a value and will not be null. So it doesn't affect on runtime, only on debugging and on writing your code. So when you are compiling, you can have a lot of warnings, and you can disable that if you don't feel safe. We can talk about this later. I mean, if you have questions related to that, it took me like 1 or 2 days to finally understand that, and I don't think that I understand it fully, because I'm fumbling trying to explain that, but we can try to navigate in the same one. Yeah, hope you don't have questions about null reference types. We can go to an example of the templates. This is just the program. If you create a console application, this is what you get. You only get this console write hello world. This means that this is a top level operator. There is no, the namespace should be here. And the project file you can see here, we have the implicit usings enable and the nullable enable. So if you want to disable the nullable reference types, you can just change this value from enable to disabled. And also, if you don't want to use implicit usings, they are still optional, but as I understood, this will be not optional in the future. And well, the templates for web and web API are similar. For web, you remember you create a web application, you have two files, the program and the startup. On this new version, or with this modernized template, the startup file is not needed anymore. You can define everything on your program. So you will need to build your web application, add all the services, do all the stuff that you normally done on the startup. But this will move it into program. So I'm gonna go next. One of the new features on .NET 6 is a bunch of new link APIs. So the first one is MaxBy and MinBy. This basically an order by descending or order by and then executing a first in link. So now you can just write MaxBy and use the property that you want to order by. So in this example, you can see it's ordered by version. It's the same as if you order by descending and do the version, and the opposite will be min by. So it will be like order by and doing the first. This MaxBy and MinBy returns a nullable type. Is like if you are calling first or default instead of first. So that's why you need to check if it's is null or not. Just to avoid compiler issues and all that stuff. The next one is DistinctBy. So you can also just take all the distinct objects from a list, for example, from a collection, base it on a property. In this case, we have these duplicated items. All of them have the same name, but with a different version. So if you do a distinct by name, you only get two results, the alpha and the bravo. Doesn't matter if they have or not the version. And the next one will be default. So you can specify a default value for first or default, single or default, last or default. By default, the default was null, but now you can set up a default object and validate against that. Instead of having a null reference, you can have, in this case, a gadget model, call it default gadget with a version 1. So this is the default gadget, and you can handle your results according to this. You see in the first of default, you use the parameter is the default. If you are doing first or default by using a filter, then it will be the second parameter as in the second option. And the last two are single and last or default. They will be the same as first or default. You just need to give this method which default value will be in the case that there is no value. There is no value to return. And the next one will be this is a try get non-enumerated count. This is just like a try catch or try style for trying to doing a count without doing enumeration. So in this example, if you try to get non-enumerated counts, but at the end, on the runtime you need to, or the compiler or the runtime needs to enumerate to get all the counts, then it will do the enumeration, or it will return the count without doing the enumeration. This is just for performance. So I think it could be useful, probably having an extension that do this, and probably have a get count or something like that. And by default, doing this on all every time you need to do a count probably will help with performance. And the last one, it's called a chunk. The chunk is, well, as its name implies, you have a list of items and you get chunks of at a predefined size. In this scenario, you're getting 20 items chunks. So you can, in this case, you will have 5 different chunks. The first 4 will be of a size of 20. I don't know, 5. The first, the first 4 will be of a size of 20, and the last one will be 15. Well, that's all I have for .NET 6. Does anyone has a question related to this? Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, I think it's 2 questions. One, you have experience migrating some project from .NET 5 to 6 or any test? And if yes, how complicated it was, or do you think it could be?
I haven't directly migrated from .NET 5 to .NET 6, but because there is a, how do you say, the changes are not very different. I mean, there is new stuff and something, but there are not so many break changes between versions. You can go and grab a list of the breaking change, but basically, one of the things that I know for sure is if you are migrating from .NET 5 to .NET 6, you don't need to worry about these nullable reference types. That will be for sure. And I know, based on experience, not done by me. This was done by Johnny Breen. He migrated .NET Framework 4.8 application to .NET 6. There are some tools that help it. Basically, just needed this tool to change the project files into the new format, and some updates in the namespaces. And I think that was all. If you're in the call, Jenny, if you want to share a bit of that, or we can.
Hi everybody. Yeah, we need to, in order to do this, first of all, upgrade all the packages, because some packages, most of all, which is using in framework, are not compatible with .NET or .NET 6. So the first step is update all that packages, and then through the tool, make the migration. Sometimes it jumps to the framework, to .NET Standard 2, and from there you can do the same migration, another level of migration, and pass to the .NET 6. This is the most complicated of the things, I think, but it's all basically follow the instructions of the tool.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's the most complicated, as he said, but was helpful to have the .NET Standard. So if Antonio, if you have, if you are planning to do a migration, just ping me about after this call so we can talk about that. Okay, let's move to the next section. I'm going to talk about what's new in ASP.NET Core 6. Basically, well, there's only one feature that I wanted to talk about. It's called the minimal APIs. With minimal APIs, it's an alternative to MVC controllers. It's not replacing that. It's just an alternative. You can have, well, as you see with some of the changes that they have done on the .NET framework and the .NET environment, they are pushing to have more clean files and minimal lines of code to execute the applications. So with this, you just need to define or use the map get, and you can you just need to map a route and a delegate an action and to do that. So in this case, if you go to the root, in this example, if you go to the root URL, you will have the hello world. This might be useful just if you want to do a quick prototype or stuff like that, or even if you're planning to do microservices and you just need to return some values, some JSON stuff or data like that. These minimal APIs will need another tech talk to dive further into all the functionality that they have. I just wanted to mention this is what's new in .NET and ASP.NET 6. And the last part will be what is new in Entity Framework or 6. Basically, we take advantage of this feature, the migration bundles. These migration bundles provides a simpler way to apply migrations. So when what does this migration bundle do is just generate an executable file with all the migrations, and you can execute that application against your database. You can just send your connection string as a parameter, and it will migrate the target database. And it can be easily created. Just you have this .NET EF migrations bundle. This is from the project that we're currently working on. So you need to specify the solution, the project where these migrations are. And this configuration usually should be released, but there was a bug when we wrote this. So you needed to use bundle to generate correctly this migration bundle. And once you have your bundle, another bug, I haven't checked if they have solved this, but another bug is that you need to have an app settings.json file at the same level as your EF bundle or executable. If not, it will fail. So it's not perfect, but it's helpful. With this, you can, for example, in DevOps, create two steps, deploy the database and then deploy the web application. And for deploying the database, you just need to execute your bundle file and pass the connection parameter, and it will execute all the migrations. If there is any, if your database is up to date, then no migrations will be done. And well, that's all for what's new in .NET 6. Do you have any questions about everything? Or we can assume that you're like Homer Simpson, lying.
Yeah.
So, okay, I think there is a question in the chat. Minimal APIs are very similar to Express the Node.js module. Haven't used Node.js, Rodrigo. Probably if you are, will be nice if you know about this to give a tech talk. It will be nice to know about another languages and another environments. Any NuGet packages in warning EO, with the current well, NuGet packages, there are a lot of NuGet packages. I'm going to talk about what NuGet or which NuGet package do you frequently use, like Mediator, Fluent Validation, and Framework. They work as expected in .NET 6. There were no issues so far. So I'm gonna just say that there is no problems with what we currently use. Also, anything done in .NET Standard 2.1 will be compatible with .NET 5. And if it's compatible with .NET 5, will work with .NET 6. Okay, if you don't have any more questions, then I just want to say thanks to you all for being on this Tech Talk. And well, see you soon.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank
I'm
you.
gonna
Thank you.
Stop
Join.
recording.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jesus.